Exactly 25 minutes past the hour.
There are several reports on new research into breast cancer in today's New England Journal of Medicine. One panel of doctors recommends that radical mastectomies be replaced in most cases with a less disfiguring kind of surgery. And researchers report that despite the development of special X-rays, the best way to detect breast cancer is still the annual physical exam. Meantime, a method of detecting breast cancer without potentially dangerous radiation has been tested successfully by doctors in Miami Beach. Bob Mayer of station WTVJ reports.
Doctors Albert Gilson and Noel Zussmer have just finished a 6-week study of 150 patients and have concluded that a prototype sonar-like device, which uses high-frequency sound waves rather than radiation, can definitely be used to identify cancerous lumps in the breast. The concept, called ultrasound or sonography, is currently in widespread use in other areas of medicine. But this automated ultrasound breast scanner, the only device of its kind, is the first successful link of the procedure with the detection of breast cancer. While the patient lies on a special bed with her breasts immersed in a tank of water, transducers attached to 2 rotating wheels take nearly 200 pictures in different densities of the breast through the transmission of sound waves. Nothing ever touches the patient's body. The images displayed on a black and white screen appear in rapid succession, giving the appearance of motion. The push of a button freezes a single image on Polaroid film for further study and for the patient's medical records. Screen images are recorded on a video disc, and as in these views of an older woman with a cancerous breast, they can be replayed at any time. The belief of doctors here is that with ultrasound or sonography, the fear of being tested, as with X-ray mammography, will diminish, both with the typical patient and with her typical doctor.
Let's assume it's a simple cyst and he wants to just follow this patient. He has no hesitation, because sonography is not radiation, of repeating this study in 2 months, in 3 months, in 6 months, because no radiation, no fear of harm to the patient. My feeling is, with the improved technique of breast sonography, this may be the screening technique in evaluation of breast disease.
Because the device is new and expensive, about $140,000, cost to the patient when the test becomes available will initially be higher than an X-ray mammogram. But it's predicted that as the procedure grows in popularity, its cost will diminish.
Doctors here say the new breast scanning procedure should be available to the public by fall. If its success continues, hospitals around the country could follow suit. Bob Mayer for CBS News, Miami Beach.
A company run by 2 young Philadelphians is staking a lot of money on the
Carol Kuhlman is a woman with strength and wisdom and guts. And she is on a journey that she intends to finish because the lives of her 2 small girls are at stake. 7.5-year-old Chandra and 6.5-month-old Charla suffer from a rare disease in which the body produces skin so fast that it literally peels off. The children's hair is so brittle that it breaks before it can grow much more than a few fractions of an inch. Worst of all, these children are allergic to most everything in their environment and nearly every food you can imagine. The 27-year-old Mrs. Kuhlman and her girls arrived in Miami by bus Sunday after a 2-day trip from their small hometown in Missouri. Having gotten help at the University of Miami School of Medicine last year with her older child, Mrs. Kuhlman was praying this time for something more concrete. Ironically, it was the birth of her second afflicted baby girl that convinced pediatric allergy specialist Dr. Douglas Sandberg of the diagnosis. The disease, he says, is Netherton syndrome, an hereditary illness that Sandberg has seen previously only in medical reports.
Well, it's a very rare problem. Probably most dermatologists might see it maybe once or twice in a whole career of practicing dermatology.
Now that there is a diagnosis, there is hope. Sandberg will try to desensitize the children to their various allergies and will try to get the girls into a program at Kansas University which is studying the use of a new drug, a vitamin A derivative, to treat the syndrome. He is optimistic. As for Mrs. Kuhlman, she is broke. Her husband is out of work. There is no money left to return home. But she knows she will find a way.
I love my children, and I don't want them to have to live a life like this. And I watch them itch and swell, and they're miserable, and they're uncomfortable. And I know that there is a way that I can get them better. I just have to find the right doctors. A lot of doctors have told me no, and I don't like to take no for an answer.
Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News.
Good evening. A Miami woman has been arrested and jailed following a bizarre series of events which uncovered a shocking sight. Channel 4's Bob Mayer says the bottom line is another illegal nursing home.
When Miami police arrived at this Northwest Section home this afternoon after a call from its owner, they thought they had a burglary on their hands. What they found was a lot different, and before it was over, the owner herself was arrested.
38-year-old Antonia Suarez said the two persons she saw leave the house left something behind, a card that said HRS. They were, in fact, inspectors for the State Department of Health and Rehabilitative Services. Prompted by reports that Suarez was running an unlicensed nursing home, the inspectors, police, and our cameras found the reports to be correct. Living in the hot, smelly garage of the house were 4 elderly persons.
Well, you can smell urine and fecus. It's putrid. And there was a bowl there with some old chicken bones and a spoon. It has a large garage door that opens up, and while I was present, it was open, and flies could come in. There were drugs that can only be dispensed by medical authorities inside the house, and syringes. No one here in this premise is qualified as an authority to dispense those drugs, so that's a serious violation.
Among the drugs found was Thorazine, a powerful injectable tranquilizer.
What police found at that first house was bad enough. Then, by chance, they looked next door.
What they found was an apparent extension of the illegal nursing home. 7 more elderly persons, most wondering what all the commotion was about. There was more to come. Those apparently in charge did not want any more pictures taken.
Oh, you tell them to get the goddamn cameras out. Hey, watch it, okay? Watch it.
But it was still not over. Tipped by a neighbor, police checked out a 3rd home across the street. What they found stunned even veteran officers.
Oh my God, nobody takes care of them here.
They're on their own over here? On their own.
From across the street, the food is brought over, left inside, and then they go back. They don't take care of them. They have to fend for themselves. Either they urinate on the bed or do in the bed.
Are they paying any kind of money?
Yeah,
A la señora de aquí le dan 500 pesos por los dos.
por los dos. $500 a month for both of them.
A medical team headed by the health department's Dr. John Cleveland arrived by late afternoon to examine a total of 13 elderly persons. With what files were available, police began calling families to pick up their relatives who, in addition to the monthly fee, were allegedly required to turn over their government checks to Mrs. Suarez. Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News.
As more and more apartments convert to condominiums, the word is sign up or get out. And all this week, Bob Mayer will be taking a look at the condo squeeze.
Condominium, to me, is a very, very dirty word. It's like the cancer. It's just, it isn't killing people, it's torturing them, which is even worse than killing them.
For many apartment tenants, particularly the older ones on Miami Beach, condominium conversion is a disease. Frequently, the elderly huddle in groups, sharing their fears of conversion and wondering aloud what they will do when their building goes condo. For the residents of Plaza 800 on West Avenue, fear is now reality.
Bad for us. Very bad for us, yes. We have no place where to go. We can't. My husband's not well. I'm not well. I can't go moving. I can't go looking for apartments. What am I going to do?
What are you going to do?
I don't know.
We certainly cannot buy because whatever little money we have, the interest keeps us going.
How bad's it going to be now?
Very, very bad.
What are you going to do?
I don't know. We'll have to go out of town because there's no place here to go.
What do you do when you have a sick husband? What do you do about that? He's in a wheelchair. What do you do? Where do you go? And what do you do about it?
What are you going to do?
What am I going to do? I'll stay here till they throw me out, and then I'll be in the street.
The fears of these people are real. Apartments are converting to condos at a dizzying rate. In just the last 6 months on Miami Beach alone, 1,850 apartment units were technically lost to conversion. Going condo are the Mona Lisa, the Plaza 800, Triton Towers, the Corinthian, the Royal Embassy, the Bell Plaza, and the Seasons. Tenants Association Chairman Shep Davis says older tenants would be happier now with rent increases if they didn't face the threat of conversions.
It is destroying their lives. It is making them very, very sick. When they should have tranquility and peace, they are living in hell.
The condominium fever is affecting young people as well as old, and garden-type apartments as well as high-rises. Tomorrow night, we'll take a look at who is buying the condominiums and why. Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News.
Many of those older apartments are gradually being turned into condominiums. And of course, that brings us to the second of reporter Bob Mayer's series on the condominium squeeze.
The conversions are done by middlemen who buy apartments from their owners, in most but not all cases, renovate the buildings, and then resell the individual units while turning a very large profit. It appears to be a very inflationary process. The landlord doesn't convert the building himself because federal tax laws would more than double the bite on his profits. If he converts his own apartment, the landlord will be taxed up to 70 cents on every dollar of profit. But if he sells the building, the landlord's profits are taxed at a maximum rate of only 28 cents on the dollar. His choice is obvious. Most South Florida conversions so far have been done by local companies. But now the lure of the big dollar in a market ripe for conversions has attracted a host of out-of-state converters. One of the biggest, American Invesco, is moving into this area from Chicago, where the market for conversions has dried up. American Invesco will do $800 million in condominium conversion business this year in the U.S. Michael Cannon is president of Appraisal and Real Estate Economics Associates, a corporation that does market research on the desirability and profitability of condo conversions. He says South Florida is in for a conversion explosion.
We're in the process of conducting such a study as to anticipating the number of rental apartments that will convert during 1980. And we're estimating that up to 10,000 units should convert in Dade County and approximately half that amount in Broward County for the year 1980.
Well, that's an awful lot more than just 1979.
Oh, it's almost 40% more, and possibly 140% more. And we should see this rate escalate. For an example, in greater Chicago area, over 85,000 units have converted over the last 4 years.
For apartment renters, the condo squeeze is about to tighten. Channel 4 News has learned that another major beach high-rise may possibly go condo in the near future, along with 6 Kendall area apartment houses. We are withholding the names because none of the sales is final. Tomorrow night, when is enough enough? Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News.
How long can the condo squeeze continue? What will stop it? Bob Mayer has the third in a series.
The Department of Housing and Urban Development says that a housing emergency exists when any municipality has an apartment vacancy rate of less than 5%. By that standard, South Florida has one heck of an emergency on its hands. Broward's vacancy rate is just 1.1%, and Dade's only 0.7%. Exclude undesirable units, and you come up with a vacancy rate of very nearly 0. The situation is critical in most of South Florida, but on Miami Beach it is worse because many elderly persons don't have the money to buy or to move. What's more, the waiting list for a typical high-rise apartment on the beach is 2 to 3 years.
The unfortunate part of this situation is that it's a dead and no hope situation. There is no place to go.
There is no place to go for some, and yet despite that fact, conversions of existing apartments to condos is increasing. I asked condo conversion analyst Mike Cannon when enough is enough.
When the market stops buying and those projects that have been converted find that they cannot sell the units, the developers that are converting them are forced then to re-rent the units as they were prior to the conversion.
We have not seen this yet?
No, sir.
You don't see this is coming?
Not in the near future at all.
You don't think the marketplace can adjust itself?
No, sir. Right. You have competition. I think that's healthy. Free enterprise, that's healthy. But when you run into a monopoly, which we've run into right now, this is a monopoly. Take it or get out. These people have no place to go.
Do you think there has to be a law?
There has to be a law, yes. I think they protect everybody else.
Do we need protection against condominium converters? Or is the halt in new apartment construction the real problem?
Builders are not going to be motivated to build rental apartments unless they can make a profit. If they can't make a profit, why should they go out and build rental apartments? They'd rather build office buildings or industrial parks or build shopping centers. And if we threaten them with rent control, we'll alienate every builder in this country forever from building rental apartments. And that's what they did on Miami Beach. They cooked their own goose over there.
Tomorrow night, a look at the positive side of condo conversions. Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News.
Not everybody thinks condominium conversions are bad, and tonight Bob Mayer shows us why.
The condo conversion phenomenon has been referred to by some who oppose it as a disease, but those on the other side see it as a cure for a closing single-family housing market and rising apartment rents. Ken Rosen of Miami is the largest condo converter in South Florida. He says conversions are one of the best things ever to happen to this area.
We don't make the market. The buyers make the market. The buyers are demanding this because this is the only affordable housing in close-in locations in America today.
Rosen says that a typical one-bedroom garden apartment that now rents for $300 or $350 a month can be purchased as a condominium for about $35,000. Even with taxes and maintenance costs, he says, a buyer comes out ahead.
Instead of $300 a month rent, they'd be paying maybe about $375 to $380 a month. Now, when you take off the tax advantages of ownership, the deductions that you receive, your payment would be less than rent. Your effective payment would actually be less than rent in many cases. 2 years from today, that same $350 a month apartment will probably rent somewhere around $425, $450, maybe even $500. That's why people realize they're better off buying a condominium today rather than to continue to rent, because with inflation, rents will continue to go up. If they buy a condominium unit, their mortgage payment remains fixed for the life of the mortgage.
Do you feel a responsibility for those who can't buy or don't want to buy and are forced out into a market where there are no vacancies?
We have never had one single case in 20 conversions of any person who has not been able to find suitable housing.
The experts say the occupancy rate here is near 100% nowadays.
It is. It's true, but there's a turnover of 40,000 apartments a year because of death, because of transfer, because of people buying houses or condominiums. People just don't stay in their apartments. There's a turnover of 40,000 units a year in Dade County.
Proving that he is performing a service, Rosen says, is the fact that an average of 50% of the tenants in the buildings he converts buy the apartments. It's the other 50%, of course, that must relocate. Rosen admits to making a nice profit, but says any successful converter must first have spent a lot of money renovating and improving the existing apartment. Tomorrow night, is there an answer? Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News.
All this week, Channel 4's Bob Mayer has been telling us about the painful condo squeeze in South Florida. Well, tonight, in his concluding report, Bob looks at some solutions.
Apartment tenants in South Florida do have some protection in condominium conversions. State law requires that they be given a 6-month period to find other housing. If a tenant's lease is longer than that, he or she stays until the lease is up. Miami Beach tenants were granted an 18-month grace period by the Beach Commission. Some say that still is not enough. In Berkeley, California, the City Council recently passed a law banning condominium conversions until the city's apartment vacancy rate rises to 5% from the current 1%. Florida Tenants Association Chairman Shep Davis says he'd settle for a law here that would bring our vacancy rate up to just 3%. Metro Mayor Steve Clark questions the constitutionality of a conversion ban, but says we do need some legislation.
I think we do now. Of course, 5 years ago I didn't think it was needed, but I think it's necessary now because there are so many individuals, husband and wife or young families that don't have the ability to go out and buy a condominium, and to be put in a position like that, if the government can step in and put some type of brake on it, I think it would be in the best interest.
Obviously, there needs to be some measure to address this very crying need here. We've got people whose lives are being totally disrupted. A terrible overall welfare question that the County Commission, I think, is going to have to address in the long run.
On the other hand, a lot of other people, including the governor, himself a developer, say the answer lies in helping the rental market.
The establishment in Florida of a Florida Housing Finance Agency to assist local communities in financing more adequate rental housing.
Builders are not going to go out to build rental apartments to lose money, and the only way you'll get them out there to start building again is to give them some dramatic incentives, tax incentives. They shouldn't have to pay any taxes on a building for 5 years just on the land.
We could use additional incentives on the part of governmental agencies to induce owners of land and developers and builders to build additional rental apartments.
Metro Commissioner Barry Schreiber, who has formed a task force on the situation, says those things are being sought.
So we're working on, from many aspects, federal, state, and local aspects, of giving them incentives and making it more conducive for them to build rental apartments. Because the basic premise is if there were more rental apartments available, those who are being displaced by the condo conversions would have a place to go and the impact wouldn't be as great.
The bottom line seems to be this. Everyone agrees that whether a law is needed or passed, the problem of condominium conversions is not going to go away unless and until there are more apartments. Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News.
As for the tomatoes, a lot of people might feel the following report is a scandal, but as Bob Mayer of station WTVJ reports, it's no accident.
In this field, deep in South Dade County, lie the ingredients for a controversy that is only just surfacing. There are millions of perfectly good tomatoes here, rotting in the South Florida sun. Each day, 500,000 pounds of locally grown crops, mostly tomatoes, are dumped in what is called a cull bin. The reason, while they are perfectly good, they are not perfect.
That's the truth. We know that this stuff is not manufactured, it's grown. And we can't grow them perfectly, and that's why you see so many culls. The appearance to the housewife and to the chain store buyers is all important. If the tomato or any vegetable doesn't look good, then it's hard to merchandise properly.
Specifically, these tomatoes have one of three problems, according to the experts. They are either misshapen, bruised in some way, or not of standard size.
The most striking thing about most of these tomatoes is that while they might not be perfect from an expert's point of view, they sure appear to be perfect from a layman's position. Many of these tomatoes have not a mark on them, and apparently only their small size has kept them from the market.
The fact that most of these rejects are edible doesn't seem to matter. Farmers say it would be too expensive to do away with them in any other manner. Many who know of the site come often, but most think it's a sad situation.
Well, I think it's a lot of waste. They should have given to people that really need them.
As for shipping the imperfect tomatoes elsewhere for canning or processing, farmers say there aren't enough of them to make that profitable. Bob Mayer for CBS News, Florida City, Florida.
Time now, 30 minutes after the hour, and Friday morning continues with Morton Dean in New York, substituting for Bob Schieffer.
County Manager Maris Steerheim went on trial today on a charge that everybody agrees is fishy. Bob Mayer explains.
Channel 4 News has learned that the alleged crime occurred here at a canal near the Turnpike Extension and 836. Steerheim, seen here in a recent photograph, reportedly was fishing without a valid fishing license and was nabbed by a game and wildlife officer. Claiming that he simply couldn't find the license to fish and believing in the scales of justice, Steerheim decided to cast his fate to a judge rather than pay a $25 fine. Today, in the courtroom of Metro Judge C.P. Rubiera, Steerheim was asked again for his license, and again he was caught up the creek without a paddle.
Mr. Steerheim? Yes, sir. Yes. You've entered a plea of not guilty to the charge. I have. Did you have a fishing license prior to the issuance of the citation? I did, sir. Do you have it to show the court, please? I do not. Do you know where it's at?
No, I couldn't find it.
Steerheim came without a license or a lawyer. His sole defense is that his secretary picked up the alleged fishing license for him in May or June, and he had affidavits prepared swearing to that. But the prosecution said not good enough. They wanted live witnesses, and as three officers of the Game and Freshwater Fish Commission looked on, Steerheim floundered and indicated he was real sorry the fish case had gone this far.
Well, but I almost am sorry, and I just didn't send him the $25, even though I think I'm innocent.
Of course, the state has a right to proceed. I can't preclude them from that, you understand? And you have your right to your day in court.
Officially, the trial has been reset, but Judge Rubiera, not wanting to debate the issue, asked the prosecutor to take depositions from Steerheim's witnesses outside the courtroom to save the expense of another trial. If that happens, the county manager might be off the hook. Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News. Warren McKee is a Miami mailman who has been nearsighted for nearly 45 of his 50 years. Glasses have corrected the condition for most of those years, but with an eyesight of 2,400, without corrective lenses, McKee is legally blind.
You make that one out?
I can tell it's an E, but I can't see it clearly at all.
That was Warren McKee at 11 o'clock in the morning. This was Warren McKee 2 hours later.
Can you see that clock across the room?
Yeah, and it's about 1 minute till.
McKee's miraculous recovery from a nearly lifelong eye defect is the result of a relatively new surgical technique called refractive keratoplasty. Nearsightedness or myopia occurs when an eye is too long and focuses in front of instead of on the retina or back of the eye. Professor Slava Fedorov of the Soviet Union has perfected a corrective technique in which tiny incisions are made around the cornea. Dr. Jerry Zellman of Miami has just returned from working with Fedorov in the Soviet Union to become one of only a handful of eye surgeons in this country to use the procedure.
As the eye heals, the scarring of the cornea causes that part of the cornea to become a little weaker than the central part, and it causes it to bulge out a little, and the central part flattens by the same amount, and that's what reduces the myopia.
Each eye is operated on separately, usually several weeks apart. Using a razor knife and working under a microscope, Zellman makes 16 incisions radiating from a circular mark made around the iris. The patient is awake and feels no pain because of anesthetic eye drops. Out of 2,000 such operations in the Soviet Union since 1974, 90% of the moderately nearsighted persons who underwent the 10-minute procedure ended up with 20/20 vision. Most of the others had enough improvement not to need glasses, and there was not one reported complication or regression.
Do you see this technique as a medical milestone?
Well, it's hard to say that right now. Based on Professor Fedorov's data, I think it's a very exciting procedure, and perhaps one day would be considered that.
There are dramatic future possibilities for this new eye technique because an estimated 700 million people in the world today are nearsighted and could benefit from it without the need for corrective lenses. Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News.
A new development in eye surgery could literally change the way millions of people see the world. Bob Mayer reports.
Warren McKee is a Miami mailman who has been nearsighted for nearly 45 of his 50 years. Glasses have corrected the condition for most of those years, but with an eyesight of 2,400, without corrective lenses, McKee is legally blind.
You make that one out?
I can tell it's an E, but I can't see it clearly at all.
That was Warren McKee at 11 o'clock in the morning. This was Warren McKee 2 hours later.
Can you see that clock across the room?
Yeah, and it's about 1 minute till.
McKee's miraculous recovery from a nearly lifelong eye defect is the result of a relatively new surgical technique called refractive keratoplasty. Nearsightedness or myopia occurs when an eye is too long and focuses in front of instead of on the retina or back of the eye. Professor Slava Fedorov of the Soviet Union has perfected a corrective technique in which tiny incisions are made around the cornea. Dr. Jerry Zellman of Miami has just returned from working with Fedorov in the Soviet Union to become one of only a handful of eye surgeons in this country to use the procedure.
As the eye heals, the scarring of the cornea causes that part of the cornea to become a little weaker than the central part, and it causes it to bulge out a little, and the central part flattens by the same amount, and that's what reduces the myopia.
Each eye is operated on separately, usually several weeks apart. Using a razor knife and working under a microscope, Zellman makes 16 incisions radiating from a circular mark made around the iris. The patient is awake and feels no pain because of anesthetic eye drops. Out of 2,000 such operations in the Soviet Union since 1974, 90% of the moderately nearsighted persons who underwent the 10-minute procedure ended up with 20/20 vision. Most of the others had enough improvement not to need glasses, and there was not one reported complication or regression.
Do you see this technique as a medical milestone?
Well, it's hard to say that right now. Based on Professor Fedorov's data, I think it's a very exciting procedure, and perhaps one day would be considered that.
The truly exciting thing about this procedure is that there are 700 million nearsighted people in the world today who could benefit from it without the need for corrective lenses.
And you're looking at one right here. What about the possible risks, Bob?
Well, Ralph, there's always that possibility. In this procedure, there is a risk of corneal puncture and infection, but I'm told those risks are low and treatable. The big rub is that Miami's Bascom Palmer Eye Institute thinks the operation should remain experimental for the time being, and I'll have more on that at 11.
All this week on The World Tonight, Channel 4's Bob Mayer will be taking a look at the latest medical discoveries and techniques. Tonight's first report shows us the light, so to speak.
This is not a preview of an upcoming science fiction movie. The sights and sounds in this room may appear to be out of this world, but what is actually happening here is very real and meaningful to those participating. These people are gathered at the Alpha Biofeedback Institute in Fort Lauderdale.